G'day, sports fans. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Sports by Fry podcast. It is late in Western Australia. It's about 10 to 11, but I've got to be here giving the fantasy community what they want. So forgive me if my appearance is a little bit shabby. The bags under my eyes are obviously Prada bags, as they say, but I'm not here to talk about how late it is. I'm here to talk all things fantasy cash cows. The teams are out for round 8. In less than 24 hours' time, the Blues and Lions will lock horns in the first game of the round. And there's a couple of pressing things that we got to talk about in the cash cow realm. There's not really too many reliable rookies filtering through as downgrade targets at the moment. So I'm going to run through each of the games, talk about my trades, talk about the rookies I think you should target, the ones you should avoid, and everything in between. So let's get amongst it. All right, I'm going to change up the format of the Cash Cow pods a little bit. Shocker, I know. If you listen to any of the Sports by Fry podcasts, you'll know that I am very inconsistently consistent. So I'm going to consistently inconsistent. You get my drift. I'm going to go through each game one by one and talk about the rookies involved in that game, because there'll be a lot of people out there that will want to potentially loophole some players. Potentially there'll be some emergencies. Obviously, the 3 Sunday squads haven't been finalized yet as well. So again, like I said at the leadoff, there's a lot to talk about. So let's start with the Blues and the Lions. The best game in the round, in my eyes. I think that this will be a belter. I really think that Carlton can take it up to Brisbane. And when the teams dropped, I know a lot of coaches, myself included, breathed a bit of a collective sigh of relief to see that Alex Chincotta kept his spot in the 22. It wasn't super in doubt. There hasn't been any rumblings over the past fortnight that he was going to lose that spot, but he's performed really well for a lot of coaches, at least over the last fortnight and probably into the future. So having him as a fieldable defensive option is great. We didn't see Lockie Cowan get back into the mix. I think he's going to stay on the outs as an emergency. I can't see him being their sub. Zach Fisher was dropped, so it'll probably be him, maybe Matt Kennedy, who's been floating through the role for a couple of weeks as well. So if you do have a Lockie Cowan, I wouldn't probably chop him out just yet. I feel like he's going to miss, so that's not going to change his price too much. And if he does come back in, he may be a handy piece throughout the buys. And again, there's not too many other defensive rooks that I'd recommend getting. Chincotta, he'll probably be on the field for a lot of coaches. On the flip side, if you are thinking about Brisbane players, then there may be someone like a Darcy Wilmot that is in your team. I think that he's proved that he can be an inconsistent but solid scorer, and he's someone that is really entrenched in that Carlton side. I don't know if I feel comfortable rolling an emergency on him and potentially trying to loophole his score, but if you can have him as an emergency in either your midfield or defense, then that might give you a handy score if carnage strikes and you have a laid out throughout the rest of the round. With a couple of changes at the Lions, we saw Harry Sharp get named as well. Now, Sharp is someone that has been a cash cow for a couple of years now. He hasn't really burst onto the scene and increased his price a ton to take him out of that price bracket. So he rolls in as a 225k midfielder this week. He's had some solid scores in the VFL, somewhat inconsistent, but decent, deserves a bit of credit. Had a 74, 111, 47 and a 38, but then a 67 in round 5. So I think he could be an all right option. There are cash cows that I prefer over him though. So I don't suggest him as a trade target, but if the midfield is the only area that you can downgrade a rookie, Sharpie could be a play. I don't think that he'll score a ton. Obviously, Will Ashcroft, the popular cash cow from Brisbane, we can all trust and put on our fields. Ollie Hollands in the midfield will be playing in this same game. He is a prime loophole candidate. I'm going to try and loop his score because I have a hunch that after a couple of strong weeks, he's averaged 70 plus for the last fortnight. We're destined to get a score in the 50s, or maybe, hopefully not, but maybe even worse. So Hollands, I think some people have already flicked him out, which I understand, but I expect him to start scoring again in the low 50s, maybe push a high 50. Brisbane are a pretty tough side, so I don't see him getting a lot of loose footy and racking up a massive score, but stranger things have happened. If you can't loophole his score, don't get too fancy. I think you can field him and he'll be all right, but he's nearing a trade moment. I don't think that there's a lot of coaches that have him in their trade sites this week because of the scores that he's put up in the last fortnight. But transitioning into the next game, a lot of people are chopping out Ruben Ginbey. Now, as you all know, I'm a massive Ginbey fan. I've been following him closely as a WA boy not just throughout the preseason, but even the draft process and prior to when he was playing for East Perth. So I think that he is a prime. How do I word this? He's a candidate that a lot of people are going to trade out, and turning him to Braden Fiorini is one of the most popular moves this week. I did explore it. I probably can't afford to do that whilst getting another rookie off my field, and turning him to Rory Atkins is something that can't really get behind. So I'm going to be keeping Jinby. He's got a break even of 67, and I think he's going to get that this week against the Tigers. He's fourth in the AFL for tackles, so we know he's probably going to be penciled in for 5 to 8 hugs a game. And his disposal hasn't really been prominent recently. But Dom Sheed comes back into the mix, who I think will take a little bit of pressure off him inside that midfield. Tim Kelly's had a great year as well. Gaffy's still floating around. Shuey's still hopefully going to get healthy and come back. But I think that you can keep Jinby for now. If you're trading him up to Fiorini, it's a risky move, but it's one that I probably tick off. Probably, but I'm not full of confidence. If you can get Jinby up to another elite defender or midfielder, then go for it. Because as I always say, these rookies have to go at some point. But personally, I'm going to be trusting him because I think that he can beat his break even this week. Another West Coast cash cow that is probably still sitting in a lot of people's teams is Campbell Chesser. Now, the injury status around him has been very murky for the past fortnight. He was listed as TBC for the most recent month, really, since he left West Coast's team. And Adam Simpson's flagged that he's going to be okay. He's going to potentially be their sub this week. Hasn't been confirmed yet. He said that he's not ready for a full game of footy. He didn't look ready for a full game of footy even when he was healthy. But I think that Chesser, if you're going to try and potentially loophole Chesser with a Hollands in your midfield, or you want to use Chesser as a potential loophole for a captain from a Josh Dunkley or a Sam Walsh on Friday night, just tread cautiously because it's very possible that Chesser does end up being West Coast's sub and Simpson gives him some minutes. Not a terrible thing for his fantasy prospects. I know that his break even is pretty high, potentially based on his scoring, but I think that Chess can be trusted somewhat for a little bit longer, and hopefully he can squeeze his way back into West Coast's team. I think as I'm looking through their emergencies, Zane True might be someone that Simo turns to as the sub. So hopefully Chesser, he's gone over to Melbourne with the rest of the team. Hopefully he's just there as a somewhat travelling emergency and he doesn't come on as the sub and score us a 6 and trend backwards, which is hard to say considering he's only priced at about $237,000. From the other side, Samson Ryan, he's someone that I've been getting a couple of questions about, to be honest, and he scored well the past fortnight. He has really thrived since Nankervis has gone down, but it is a bit of a risky play on the field. I don't think I can trust him, even though West Coast only has Bailey Williams as their real recognisable ruckman. Ivan Soldo came back into Richmond's team last week, scored a 72, looked all right doing it. He's listed as their starting ruckman, so I think it's probably wise if you do have Samson Ryan to just leave him on the pine. If you're looking at trading for him, I'll address that a little bit later when I'm talking about some questions, but may have missed the boat. I'd rather utilise that cash elsewhere. And I think with Tom Lynch out, he'll probably be deployed closer to goal as a marking, kicking goal threat. So that may affect his scoring in a negative way as well. Looking at the Cats and Crows game, the only real relevant cash cow in this game is Luke Pedlar, who, much like Ollie Hollands, has performed well for the coaches that have trusted him in the last fortnight. He had his ups and downs earlier on and he missed that week through suspension, but I really do like the way that Luke Pedlar goes about his business. Midfielder turns, call it half forward. I think that he can be fine if you're fielding him at F6, but brace yourselves because Geelong are a tough team, and if Pedlar goes out there, he may dish up a 47 or something of the sorts. Another cash cow that not many people have, but could be potentially sitting in your back line on the bench is Max Michelini. Now, he's been good as a footballer, but he hasn't really had a great fantasy output. He's scored in and around the 50 mark. His break even's pretty much bang on that at the moment. So if you do have him, now is a smart time to offload. The D's will play the Suns in the next game. And there are a couple of relevant fantasy players in this one from a cash cow standpoint. Cade Chandler is the big one who most people will have given the flick by now. I know a lot of coaches toyed with it in the last fortnight. And if you did, you missed out on his big 106 off the dome against North Melbourne last week. But he's kicked 6 goals in the last fortnight. He kicked 3 last week against North. I don't think that he'll have as easy a day out against the Gold Coast Suns. And I think that some of the defenders down there will make life a little bit harder for him. So Again, don't get too fancy. Keep fielding Cade Chandler, but get ready to have a what's the word I'm looking for here? An evacuation plan, because Chandler is nearing his peak. That big score last week will help him generate a bit more cash, but he is a rookie and a forward rookie at that. And he doesn't seem like he's going to be pushing up the deck a ton. I was ready to axe him last week after his somewhat low scores. So brace yourself for that. Judd McVee, another demon who's been doing his thing. No fuss attitude from the bloke, just similar to McElhaney, scoring his 50s, had a couple of 60s throughout there or high 50s. So he's someone probably in a similar mold as Darcy Wilmot that you can just leave on your bench and he can be a handy emergency. Jacob Van Ruin, I know a lot of coaches, myself included, don't have the same amount of faith in his prospects anymore. And he has kind of done his role as a cash cow. I don't think it's going to be a terrible idea if you do want to give him the flick. He only scored a 49 last week. He's been averaging a 40 in his last 3 games. He's made you 141K, a break even of 38. It might be time to offload him. Again, there aren't too many other rookies that are screaming out as downgrade options, though. So he's hardly a pressing trade matter, but if flicking him frees up a bit of cash to allow an upgrade somewhere else around the ground, I don't hate that idea. I reckon it's a good maneuver. If you're looking at the other side of the slate, we've got the Gold Coast Suns there. Good to see Bailey Humphrey holding his spot despite 0 last week. That's right. The man scored 0. And it's not great for the Sports by Fry brand because I was really keen on this kid. Gave him massive raps rolling into the preseason and thought that if he did come into Gold Coast's team that he would have a more fantasy-friendly role. And when I turned on the Tigers Suns game last weekend and saw him starting at the first centre bounce, I was licking my lips. I was ready for Humphrey to take over, dominate, score a 70 plus, and be probably the most traded in player this week. But I actually gave him the flick the week prior, and it turned out to be a smart maneuver. So if you do have Bailey Humphrey, it's clear that you can't be playing him on your field, especially now that Sam Flanders has come back in. Braden Fiorini is playing well, and he's going to have a mix of inside and outside, Stewie Dew has said. So for those reasons, Humphrey's scoring will probably still be pretty shithouse, around the 30s. So you can't be putting him on your field. But I think it's okay to keep him. He may be there throughout the bye period. He's got that handy round 13 bye, so that could help some coaches. But it's a bit disappointing to see that he hasn't been able to translate his games and his game time into big scores. Like I said, Sam Flanders is back in. Tom Berry is the other bloke that's coming in for the Gold Coast Suns, making his club debut. He's a very cheap forward. But when I say very cheap, he's 286K. It's a no from me. I don't think that Tom Berry can be trusted. Hasn't had a proven track record of scoring. He's come in potentially for Alex Sexton. I was a bit surprised to see that Malcolm Roses has kept his spot. And I think that one of those two dudes, or one of the dudes I've mentioned, I should say, Berry, Humphrey, or maybe even Malcolm Roses will be subbed off in that game. So you probably don't want to invest in Berry because there's no guarantees that he will hit his break even. And I don't even know if he'll be there for the long term. Turning to the Saturday night games, we've got the Giants and the Bulldogs in what is become one of the best modern day rivalries. And like I've said, the Giants, I think, are a hard team to score against. So luckily for us, there's not too many Bulldogs cash cows. No, I don't think Arthur Jones is an option. There's 500 coaches that have traded him in this week after he kicked his first goal in round 7 and scored a 50, but don't go wasting a trade on Artie Jones. From the Giants side, though, the most popular traded in rookie at the moment and the third most popular traded in player overall is Ryan Angwin. Now, he had 20 touches in his first game of the year when Tom Green was out. I did flag that when Tom Green comes back, Angwin could get pushed out, but he's seemingly jumped over Harry Rouston in the depth chart. And for that reason, he's been able to score a 54 and then a 45 in back-to-back weeks. So I expect him to probably score again around that 50 mark against the Doggies. And again, 255K, he's not a perfect cash cow, but given the lack of reliable downgrade options, he's someone that a lot of people are trading into their side. And I can see the appeal in doing that. Mid-forward gives you a little bit of extra flexibility as well. So he's someone that I'm certainly targeting this week in my trades. And I think now that he's leapfrogged Rouston, he's been able to stay in the side, even though these other guns are still performing well. He's named on a wing. Not that where players are named matters a shitload, but I think that he can be all right in this matchup, but I wouldn't be shocked if he rocked up, scored shit, and was out of the team next week. So just prepare yourself in case that does happen. The other game that's on Saturday night, we got the Dockers clashing with the Hawks. I'm actually going to this game, which I'm looking forward to. It'll be good to get a first-hand look at some of the defensive rookies that Hawthorn has at their disposal. Cam Mackenzie, just quickly, didn't make his way back into the side. Very prime sub-candidate, if you ask me. If you haven't given him the flick, I know most people listening to this probably have traded him out in the last couple of weeks, but if he is still sitting in your midfield or your forward line, I'd be ditching the bloke ASAP. I think he is probably the number one trade priority for rookie players, cash cows, if you do have him. But there are a couple of other Hawks that I'll have my eye on, mainly Seamus Mitchell. If you didn't trade him in the last couple of weeks, it's probably you've missed the boat. I think it's fair to say. I didn't get on the man when I probably should have as well. Had a couple of other forced trades, and at the moment he's gone up to 322k. Defender forward is very handy from a positional standpoint. Subbed out at 44 last week, but he still has a low break even of 6. So I think that he can not only get his break even, but I think that he can return to scoring in the 60 range, and he's a good cash cow. But yeah, $322 is too much to spend up. Similar could be said for his teammate who made his debut last week, Josh Weddle. He will crack my top 5 as rookie trade targets this week, but he had 5 tackles, 5 marks last week against the Doggies. Got a break even of 17. I don't think he'll churn out much higher than a 45 to 55, and there's no guarantees unless Hawthorn chip the ball around a lot that he will score well, but I will be very intently watching his role just to see if he does push up the ground a little bit, because there was rumours in the preseason he was going to kind of play that role, go up the ground, play as a bit of a winger. So if he does that, he could be a potential option, but 282k is what he'll set you back. So again, I think it's only 30k difference from a Ryan Angwin type, but 30k difference could be the difference between you making the trade you want next week and the trade that you don't want, because I've been looking at a lot of different trade scenarios this week, and I'm about 15 grand short of pulling off the one that I really want to do. So it doesn't sound like a lot of cash, but it is something to take into consideration as well. Lastly, from the Hawks standpoint, Fergus Green, I think he'll take a couple of marks in this game and get his scoring back on track. Some people are giving him the flick, though. I can see why. He's a key forward. He probably won't be scoring amazing while he's out there against the Dockers, but he's okay. He only scored 18 last week, which jacked his break even up to 43. No guarantees that he hits that, but much like Wilmot that I talked about before, his spot in Hawthorn's side seems pretty safe. So I'd keep Greeny around. Someone that a lot of people might be having second thoughts about keeping around is Matty Johnson. Now, he's obviously been suspended after his tackle on Dane Zorko last week. 2 games is what the man copped, which is not ideal if you took the punt on Jono, but there's only 800 coaches that have traded him out, and I think that nearly a quarter of teams have him in their side. It's probably a fine idea to hold on to him. Justin Longmuir actually gave him pretty solid props, and while he is out, it's a bummer. He said that it'll give him a time to freshen up, and then he can charge back into the middle portion of the season. So keeping Matthew Johnson for the next couple of weeks is an all right hold, I think, unless a pressing rookie comes to fruition. 280k is what he costs, so he still has money to make. Break even of 0, I think that he's fine to hold on to. And there aren't really many other blokes to talk about from Freo's standpoint. Sam Sturt was dropped, so he probably won't be getting back into the side, especially with Michael Frederick now healthy. Nat Fyfe has been named as the sub as well, so he won't be used in that role. And barring a late change, we won't see Carl Warner or him break into the Dockers side. If they lose, things may change, but I think it's fair to say that Fremantle, from a cash cow standpoint, are kind of drying up. Now, turning my attention to the Sunday games, there are a couple of rookies that their spot in the team hasn't been finalised. So take what I'm about to say in these 3 games with a bit of a grain of salt. It may be dated by the time Friday afternoon rolls around. But looking at the first game between the Bombers and the Power, Alwyn Davey is back into the team, essentially taking Jai Menzies' spot. I reckon a 40 to 45 is what he's probably going to score. A lot of people have already given Davey the flick, but if he's in your team and now that he's playing, could be another handy emergency. From Port Adelaide's standpoint, I think it's a bit of a bummer that Dylan Williams hasn't been locked into their team yet. And looking through their bench, there's no guarantees that he'll make the final 22. He was scored a 67, just gone, and I think he had a couple of 40s prior to that, because I was getting a few people questioning, asking if he's a viable trade candidate. But now that I've got his box score up, he had, like I said, 67 against St Kilda, but followed previously before that he had 32, 46, 49. So if he does come in against Essendon, I think that the Dons, regardless of what the fantasy numbers say, aren't going to give up a ton of points to players of Dylan Williams' ilk. Ollie Lord is the other one who's on that extended bench, and I don't think that he's worth targeting either. I know that he's cheap, but key forwards usually are players that we want to steer away from. Turning attention to Sydney versus Collingwood, another pretty good game in my eyes. I wouldn't be surprised if the Swans took it right up to Collingwood. I mean, the Pies have to lose sooner or later, right? But Angus Sheldrick is the big rookie talking point out of this one. I'm still taking a glass half full approach with this kid. If you're a non-owner though, then I think it's probably wise just to wait, see what his role looks like, see if he does make that final 22. And if he does have a belter score, then you can probably jump on him next week and he won't rise too much in value. Only scored 18, obviously, in round 7. So his break even elevated from the mid-20s to what all cash cows enter the fantasy realm priced at. So I think that Sheldrick is someone that you just want to keep an eye on. Maybe could be, again, another handy emergency pick. And then if you look at the other side, Collingwood don't really have cash cows. No, Will Kelly isn't really an option, even if he does maintain his spot in their side. Last game of the round, we got the Roos versus the Saints. Harry Sheezel is back to his best. Hopefully he can churn out another 110, 115 plus score. That'd be nice. But Blake Drury, the 5th most traded in player at the moment, is another big talking point. First pick of the rookie draft last season, and he got pretty good raps from all reports. He's been chopping and changing his time whilst playing for North Melbourne's VFL side. I know that he spent time in his junior career at both ends of the ground, and he's done that a little bit as well for the Roos. His VFL scores read 81, 49, 50, 65, and 84. So he's had some bright moments. He's listed at centre half back, which is obviously not where he's going to play primarily, but he may play in the back line and eke out a couple of cheap +6s if North Melbourne chip the ball around and St Kilda try to lock it in their forward half. So he's definitely a target, and I think there's not much separating him and Angwin, and I'll talk about the rookie trade targets in just a moment. But yeah, hopefully he can score well, but he's not someone that you have to trade in right away. You can definitely wait a week and see what his role looks like, and mainly if he holds his spot in North Melbourne's team. On the other side, Mateus Fulapu is one of the most traded out players this week. He can go. I had, again, pretty big props on him, and I thought that he would be great. His fantasy game would translate to the pros, but he hasn't really delivered on that promise. And as a result, he's stalled in value for most of the coaches. 416 from memory, yep, is what he's priced at. Over 10,000 coaches have given him the flick this week, and I am certainly one of them. And I think that if you can chop him out and you can still get some decent moves around the ground, then that's a wise tactic. All right, so let's talk about some trade targets from a rookie standpoint. I think Angwin and Drury are really the two in my eyes that matter at the moment. Josh Weddle, Harry Sharp, probably a little bit below them. And God, I don't even know who I'll pick 5th for this list. Have to wait for the Sunday teams to get finalised. But the difference between Angwin and Drury probably won't be a ton. I think that Angwin holding his spot in the Giants team, like I said, for the last couple of weeks is promising, and he's going to get, I think, the slight edge as the number 1 rookie trade target in my eyes this week, mainly because Drury is a little bit cheaper. You can wait and see what his role looks like, see if he's still in North Melbourne's plans come round 9, and if that's the case, then you can launch into him. Buy structure, they have the same buy, so that doesn't really dictate a lot. The rookies, though, like I've said, I don't really love a lot of them. So outside of those two, you could maybe take a punt on Sharp, maybe pay up for Weddle, but I don't think that a lot of coaches will be making too many rookie downgrades and trying to address those red dots on the bench. It is a bit alarming, I know, as someone that has a couple of red dots myself, to see all those non-playing rookies, but just pump the brakes, wait and see. There will be some rookies that come through. The mid-season draft always gifts us with a couple as well. I know that Elijah Sardis is slowly starting to get healthy. George Wardlaw was building to a debut before he got a knee knock last week. So because there's not too many pressing rookie trade targets in my eyes at the moment, you can afford to wait a little bit and address the other on-field players like a Jinby, like a Hollins, make some moves around the edges and hopefully upgrade your team and get more points on the field. All right, let's answer some questions, shall we? I put the call out to Twitter and to Insta and a few other platforms for people to drop a line, and I reckon I'll keep this streak going for Thursday night pods. There may be some that come out Friday once the teams are finalised, but I want to try and give people as much time as possible to listen to this episode before the weekend of footy arrives. So let's turn straight to Twitter. Josh Davey asks if you should trade out McGrath to Fiorini, which allows him to upgrade Setterfield to a primo, or instead, does he go for a good old 1 up, 1 down, do Cowan to Drury, and then McGrath to someone like Chera? I think there's a lot of coaches in a similar position. As a McGrath owner myself, I really don't know what I'm going to do with the bloke. I think because I want to make some other moves around the edges, and I don't know if I really want to go McGrath to Fiorini. It's definitely an option. I think that McGrath can wait another week or two. If you don't have anything more pressing, though, then I don't hate the idea of turning him to a Chera and turning Cowan into Drury. Out of those two moves, that's what I'd prefer. I talked about Will Setterfield and Andy McGrath on Monday's episode, and I think Setterfield doesn't have the greatest fortnight of games coming up. Port Adelaide in Adelaide and then Brisbane in Brisbane. However, I think the role is there for him, so you can pump the brakes a bit and hopefully trust him to get back to an 85 plus score. McGrath, I don't have the same optimism. So if you're going to chop him out, Adam Chera is someone that is definitely trending in the opposite direction and is a great trade target. And I think that going Cowan down to Drury is a fine rookie move as well. Joe Kelly asks if you should go Tom Berry or Blake Drury if he has to bring in a cheap rookie. Kind of talked about both of these dudes already, and I think that Drury will probably outscore Berry, and there's no guarantees that either of them will be in the team next week. But I have more faith, given North Melbourne's potential position and their not injury crisis, but the injuries they do have. Tommy Power going down, Luke Davies-Uniacke's been named, but who knows how healthy he is. I think that Drury is a better option out of those two for sure. Dave Fermark asks, can Samson Ryan hang around until the buys with Nankervis and Lynch out? Just need him scoring 50s on the field and making some cash while I clean up my mess of a bench. As I said, there are no guarantees that rookies are going to keep coming through on the bench, but fielding Samson Ryan does seem like a bit of a dicey maneuver. One of the other questions I got from Dan Drew, which is why I'm multitasking at the moment, did ask a similar thing regarding Samson Ryan. Wrong button. He asked that if Samson Ryan has a negative break even a -1, could he be around for 2 to 3 weeks without Nank and a solid downgrade option? Maybe, probably not though. I mean, without these rookies floating around, and part of the reason why Rory Atkins is the most traded in player this week, people are trying to get a bit fancy and make some moves around the edges. Samson Ryan is now priced at $353,000. So I don't know if it's super wise to trade him in. He has had a 57, 15, 32, 51, 69, 73 on the season. So if there's nothing better to do, I mean, he's going to make you some money with a negative break even. He's got West Coast this week. No serious threat of Toby Nankervis. The more I think about it now, actually, he might be an all right play. I would definitely rather, especially if you're going to field him like Dave Fermack asks, I'd probably want to do another move to get someone more reliable on my field, even if that's jumping up to a Jason Johannisen type. He could be all right. If you want to try and deviate from that and try and get another random rookie that you think is going to score okay. If you don't have Pedler or Chandler, it feels very bizarre to be trading one of them in, but I have a bit more faith in them over someone like Samson Ryan. Gun to my head, though, if I had to answer Dan's question, I would say that yes, you can trade in Samson Ryan, given that Nankervis is out at least for a couple of weeks and that he's got West Coast going up this week with a negative break even. From Dave's standpoint, can he hang around till the buys with them out? I think so. I think he's playing well enough to stay in the team, and hopefully he can keep churning out these 60s if Dan has to field him. John, since you've been gone, asks 2 questions. Lucky bugger. First one, which 2 go first out of Wagner, Cowan, Jimby, and Philippou? Looking to move them to Angwin and Fiorini. Out of those 2, I would say Philippou probably goes first because I have the least amount of faith in him to keep going up in value. Jinby probably goes last because I like his role the best. And then Cowan and Wagner are in similar positions. I would side to trading Wagner because I think his path back into Fremantle's side is going to be much more difficult than Lockie Cowan getting another gig. So to answer that question, Philippou and Wags go first for me. And then the second one, is Angwin the top rookie target or take a punt on Drury? I've addressed this. I've talked about it. I'm still not super confident in which way to go. I think the way that you can define this is depending a little bit on what that extra 55K lets you do, because that's the price difference between Angwin and Drury. If you want to try and potentially upgrade a Jinby to someone better than Fiorini and go on down to Blake Drury gives you the extra cash to do that. Not a terrible shout at all. I don't think either of them can be trusted on the field, at least this week. We'll have to wait and see how they go on the weekend, but I still think that Angwin's role is a little bit more solidified and his job security is a bit higher than Drury's. So I'd give him the edge slightly, but again, if that cash frees up another move around the ground, I might be saying different. All right, last question comes from big time fan. Shout out to Anthony. He asks, what's better, McElhaney to Drury, which allows him to go Jinby to Petrarca with a very little amount of cash left over, or go Cowan down to Drury, and then Jinby up to a Neil, and then it leaves him with even less money, $0. So if he does go down the McElhaney out route, then that leaves him with 4 rookies left on the field. I'd like to be in that position myself. I think out of those 2 options, I think going McElhaney to Drury and then Jinby up to Petrarca is a good move. I think Petrarca's a great trade target this week, primed for the picking. I know a lot of people would prefer to get Clayton Oliver into their teams. I would too, but Petrarca is probably not going to be too far behind him this week against the Suns. I reckon that there'll be about... actually, I'm going to say that I reckon Petrarca outscores him this week. There you go. And Petrarca, like I said on Monday, he always has these big scores a couple of times a year, and they usually come in bunches. So don't be shocked if we see another big 125, 130 from Petrarca on the weekend. So Jinby, again, harboring back to what I was saying earlier, I think he's a really good rookie. I think that you can hold on to him and have some faith in him. But if it nets you a Petrarca by trading him out, it's a fantastic move. Go for it. Don't think twice. And that is that. Another Sportsby pod wrapped up. Quickfire, a little bit longer, actually. I take back the quickfire, a little bit longer format. But going through each of the individual games, I think allows me to kind of paint the picture for what's going on in the round and address some of the rookies at a little bit greater depth. My trades, just quickly, I'm turning Matthias Philippou into Jason Johannesson, someone that I've been talking about for a couple of weeks now, and I'm going to go up. I could get Braden Fiorini and toggle some magnets around, but I can't really trust the man. And to be honest, if McGrath fucks up again this week, I will just turn him into Fiorini next week and then have a bit of extra cash to play with that will hopefully allow me to get another rookie off my field. The second move, I've still got Corey Wagner rotting on my bench, so he will probably go, and I'm tossing up, like all coaches are, between getting Angwin and Drury. I think I'm going to take Drury just so I've got a bit of extra cash in my pocket, but neither of them will be on the field, so it doesn't really matter. I may change my mind if when other news develops throughout Friday that I think Angwin's a better target. But like I've said the whole podcast, there's not much separating either of them. So hopefully you have a bit more conviction and confidence in your trades this week. Good luck for round 8. Hopefully when I'm back wrapping a weekend of fantasy footy, I've churned out another score north of 22-50 and no one else has. But that would be wishful thinking given the rabble of a team that I currently have. Like I said, though, good luck for this week. Thanks as always for tuning in. Till next time, peace.